Welcome to Unit 3. We've spent Units 1 and 2 thinking about probability and diagnostic tests, how we reason about disease in individual patients. Now we zoom out. Unit 3 is about measuring disease in populations, counting how much of it there is, where it's coming from, and what the numbers actually mean. We start with two foundational measures that every epidemiologist and every clinician uses constantly, often interchangeably and incorrectly. Prevalence and incidence are not the same thing. They answer different questions. They're calculated differently, and mixing them up leads to real errors in how you interpret surveillance data, research findings, and disease burden estimates. By the end of this talk, you'll be able to define, calculate, and distinguish prevalence and incidence, including the subtypes of each, and understand what each one is appropriate to use for. We'll also cover case fatality rate, which is closely related and frequently confused with mortality rate. Let's go. Here, the conceptual anchor for this entire talk. Prevalence is a snapshot. It captures everything in the frame at a single moment in time. Incidence is a stream. It captures what's flowing in over a defined period. Prevalence counts all existing cases, animals that currently have the disease, whether they've had it for a week or a year. It answers the question, right now, how much disease is in this population? This is a number that tells you about the current burden of disease, how many resources you need, how many animals are affected, what the current impact is. Incidence counts only new cases, animals that were disease-free at the start of your observation period and developed disease during that period. It answers the question, how fast is this disease developing? This is a number that tells you about risk, the probability that a currently healthy animal will become diseased. It's also the number most sensitive to changes in exposure, to the effects of interventions, and to the dynamics of an outbreak. The critical rule for incidence: an animal must have been at risk, meaning disease-free at the start of the observation period, to be counted as an incident case. Animals that already have the disease when you start watching don't contribute to incidence. They're prevalent cases. This distinction matters enormously in practice. If you're evaluating whether a vaccine is working, you need incidence. You're asking whether healthy vaccinated animals are getting sick at a lower rate. Prevalence won't tell you that cleanly because it includes animals that got sick before vaccination started. If you're planning resource allocation for a chronic disease management program, prevalence is what you need. It tells you how many animals currently require care. Prevalence comes in two flavors, and specifying which one you mean is not optional if you want your numbers to be interpretable. Point prevalence is the true snapshot. You count all cases at a single defined moment. You walk through a herd on March 15th and culture every cow for subclinical mastitis. 47 of your 200 cows are positive. Point prevalence is 47 divided by 200, which is 23.5%. Clear, unambiguous, time-specific. Period prevalence asks how many animals had the disease at any point during a defined time window. You review mastitis records for all 200 cows over the entire calendar year. 63 different cows had at least one mastitis episode during the year. Period prevalence is 63 divided by 200, which is 31.5%. Note that period prevalence will almost always be higher than point prevalence for the same disease and population, because you're capturing all cases that were active at any point during the window, not just the ones happening to be active on a single day. Both types are useful, but for different purposes. Point prevalence is what you want for a cross-sectional survey or a disease burden estimate at a specific moment. Period prevalence is more useful for understanding cumulative disease burden over a production cycle, a management period, or a year. The trap that catches students: period prevalence looks like it should be incidence because it covers a time period, but it's not. Period prevalence includes both new cases that developed during the period and old cases that were already present and persisted into the period. Incidence counts only the new ones. As prevalence has two types, incidence comes in two forms, and choosing between them depends on whether your population is stable or changes over the observation period. Incidence proportion, also called cumulative incidence, is the simpler of the two. You start with a defined population of at-risk animals, follow them for a defined period, and count how many develop the disease. 18 calves out of 150 at-risk calves develop bovine respiratory disease over 60 days. Incidence proportion is 18 divided by 150, which is 12%. You can interpret this directly as a probability. A calf entering this feedlot has a 12% chance of developing BRD in the first 60 days. This measure assumes all animals are followed for the entire period, but in real populations, animals are born, die, are sold, move in and out. The population is not stable. For those situations, you use the incidence rate. Incidence rate, also called incidence density, accounts for the fact that different animals contribute different amounts of observation time. Instead of dividing the number by the number of animals at the start, you divide by the total animal time at risk, the sum of the time each animal was under observation and disease-free. In our calf example, if the 150 calves contributed 7,200 total calf days at risk, the incidence rate is 18 divided by 7,200, which is 0.0025 cases per calf day, more usefully expressed as 2.5 cases per 1,000 calf days. The incidence rate has a useful interpretation. It represents the instantaneous rate at which new cases are developing in the population. It's directly comparable across populations with different follow-up times and different sizes, which makes it the measure of choice for large epidemiological studies and surveillance programs. The attack rate, which you'll see in outbreak investigations, is simply an incidence proportion calculated in an outbreak context. We'll come back to it in Unit 7. The bathtub analogy is one of the most useful in all of epidemiology, and I want you to hold on to it. Imagine your population as a bathtub. The water level in the tub represents prevalence, all the current cases. Water flows in through the faucet, that's incidence, new cases developing. Water drains out through two drains, recovery or cure on one side, death on the other. The duration of disease determines how long any given unit of water stays in the tub before it drains. The mathematical relationship for stable populations is prevalence approximately equals incidence rate multiplied by average disease duration. This formula has profound practical implications. A disease can have high incidence but low prevalence if animals recover or die quickly. Acute respiratory infection in a neonatal calf barn might have very high incidence during an outbreak, but because calves either recover in a week or die within days, the prevalence at any given moment is relatively low. Conversely, a disease can have low incidence but high prevalence if it's chronic and long-lasting. Feline chronic kidney disease has relatively low annual incidence in any given cat, but because cats live with it for years before dying, the prevalence in older cat populations is very high. This matters for how you interpret data. If you see high prevalence of a disease in a surveillance report, you cannot conclude that the disease is spreading rapidly. It might just mean animals are living with it longer because treatment has improved. If you want to know whether the disease is spreading, you need incidence. If you want to know how many animals currently need care, you need prevalence. Case fatality rate is one of the most commonly misunderstood and misreported numbers in outbreak situations, so I want to be very precise about what it measures and what it doesn't. The case fatality rate is a proportion of animals that have the disease who die from it. It is a measure of disease severity. How lethal is this disease once an animal has it? It tells you nothing about how likely any random animal in the population is to get the disease. In our EHM example, 34 horses at a show facility develop confirmed neurological disease. 8 of them die or are euthanized. Case fatality rate is 8 divided by 34 times 100%, which is 23.5%. That is a frightening number. Nearly 1 in 4 horses that develop EHM neurological disease dies. That tells you a great deal about disease severity and the importance of early supportive care. But notice what the CFR does not tell you. It says nothing about how many of the hundreds of horses at that facility were exposed and never developed neurological signs. The population risk of dying from EHM at this facility might be much lower than 23.5% because many horses were exposed and remain subclinical. The classic confusion is between CFR and mortality rate. Mortality rate is deaths divided by the total population. It includes all animals, sick and healthy. CFR is deaths divided by cases only. It's conditional on being sick. They answer fundamentally different questions. During the COVID-19 pandemic, this confusion played out publicly and consequentially. Early CFR estimates based on confirmed cases dramatically overestimated population risk because many mild cases were never confirmed. The same trap exists in veterinary outbreak reports. The summary. Prevalence is a snapshot of existing cases. It comes in point and period forms. Incidence measures new cases as a proportion for stable populations or as a rate using animal time for changing populations. The bathtub relationship, prevalence equals incidence times duration, explains why high prevalence doesn't always mean high incidence and vice versa. And case fatality rate measures how lethal a disease is once an animal has it, not how likely a random animal in the population is to get or die from the disease. Use incidence when you want to measure risk or evaluate the effect of an intervention. Use prevalence when you want to understand current disease burden or plan resource allocation. Use CFR when you want to characterize disease severity in affected animals. And always specify your denominator, because a number without a denominator is not a rate. It's just a count. Pause the video and try to work this scenario out on your own. We'll then work it together. Question 1, incidence proportion. New cases equals 3,200. Population at risk at start is 50,000. Incidence proportion equals 3,200 divided by 50,000 equals 0.064 equals 6.4%. Interpretation. Over this 42-day grow-out cycle, 6.4% of birds developed necrotic enteritis. This is the probability that any bird starting the cycle disease-free will develop necrotic enteritis during the cycle. Question 2, point prevalence on day 21. Current cases on day 21, 1,100. Total population at day 21. We'll assume approximately 50,000 minus deaths before 21, but for simplicity use 50,000. Point prevalence equals 1,100 divided by 50,000 equals 0.022 equals 2.2%. Interpretation. On day 21, specifically 2.2% of the flock is currently showing clinical signs of NE. Question 3, case fatality rate. Deaths equal 800. Total NE cases equals 3,200. CFR equals 800 divided by 3,200 times 100% equals 25%. Interpretation. 25% of birds that developed NE died. This is a measure of disease severity. NE with 25% CFR is a serious disease. Note that the population mortality from NE is 800 divided by 50,000 equals 1.6%. Very different from the CFR. Question 4, both the manager and the colleague are right. They're just measuring different things. The manager is reporting point prevalence. 1,100 birds are sick right now, which is 2.2% of the flock. That's an accurate snapshot of current disease burden on day 21. The colleague is reporting incidence proportion. 3,200 birds developed NE at some point during the cycle, which is 6.4% of the starting population. That's an accurate measure of the cumulative risk over the full grow out. Neither number is wrong. They answer different questions. The manager's number tells you how many birds need treatment today. The colleague's number tells you how serious the overall NE problem was across this production cycle. Both are important, and the confusion between them is exactly why specifying your measure and your time frame is not optional in epidemiological reporting.